Howdy guys, Jimmy Song here. I'm talking in this video about why nobody really uses decentralized applications. Now, this is something that's been hyped for a very long time. There's a lot of people hyping it on all sorts of ICO platforms or whatever. But I wanted to talk about the actual economic incentives and the game theory behind the incentives that are out there. First of all, a lot of these decentralized applications sell a token, and the ostensible reason for the token is for utility, right? These are called utility tokens for that reason. They are meant to be utilized for some good or service in the future. So the idea behind Augur is that you can use the token to bet on something or have reputation or something like that. There's some reason for the token's existence, and that's what decentralized applications are for. Now, here's the thing that makes decentralized applications really not viable. First, it has to be decentralized. So the companies that create this ultimately have to give up control, in which case they're not really gaining any money out of it at that point, right? Like they're not in the middle of this transaction because it's supposed to be peer-to-peer, in which case they don't make any money. So so from a business perspective, they have to raise all that money at the beginning, which is why they sell these tokens. Now, the token holders supposedly are going to get some good or service once the platform is built by these centralized entities that are building these things. But once it's built, they're supposed to be able to do things on a peer-to-peer basis. But of course, like the version 1 of almost any software really sucks. And I say this as a software developer, no matter how much market research you do, and no matter how much you try to anticipate everything that a user might want, it's extremely difficult to get it right on the first try. And what ends up happening is that, well, okay, these developers go, okay, here's the thing, here it is, and then they find out like almost nobody uses it. And this is very common in almost any startup. You try again because you didn't quite capture the market, or it wasn't quite solving the problem that you thought they had, or it wasn't as big of a problem, or whatever. And people end up not using your product. So you have to iterate and try again. With decentralized applications, this becomes very, very difficult because, again, it's supposedly decentralized, supposedly peer-to-peer. You already set the rules and released it and everything, but then people don't use it, so you have to tweak something. But you can't really, right? Like, part of it is that the token already exists, and you already told people exactly what that token was supposed to be used for, and maybe you didn't price it correctly or whatever. You can't really change things. So first reason is because, the first versions of products kind of suck, and it's really hard to upgrade, right? Like that makes it so that the apps are not really that usable on the first try. And to get to a second try takes nearly as long as it got to get to the first try. So nobody ends up using it for that reason. Second reason is because people aren't really incentivized to spend their tokens. A lot of these, ICOs sort of depend on the price of the token continuing to go up for all of the economic incentives to work. So if that's the case, why would I spend it? If it's going up in value, why would I spend it? Conversely, if it's going down in value, why would I use it? I would want to get all my tokens out as soon as possible. Now, it's possible I can consume all of those tokens by getting lots and lots of that good or service that it's supposedly good for. But if it's going down in value, I want to get that out of there, right? I will want to put it into some other store of value. So this creates all this selling pressure, because if you own too much of it, and the price is going down, you're not going to be able to consume that much that quickly. So there's this other force that causes the price to basically go up and down very fast. The utility almost becomes secondary. In fact, it is secondary for our vast majority of these tokens, is that the utility is only the nominal thing. It's most people use it or are incentivized to hold it or incentivized to sell it based on the price. The last reason why nobody really uses it is because people, it's really ripe for disruption. It's really too expensive. A decentralized application needs to be decentralized. By definition, that means there's no central party, central database where everything lives, in which case everybody has to pay that cost. Everyone has to run a node or something like it in order to run it. If it's better centralized, then, well, a centralized entity is going to disrupt your business. If it's better decentralized, then, well, it's going to be very, very expensive, in which case, the good or service better be really worthwhile. Vast majority of these goods and services are not worthwhile. In fact, the only one that we really found that makes sense is money. And that's because central authorities tend to abuse the production of money. With almost every other central entity, for example, like Amazon.com, they're clearly a central entity, but they also provide value, and they don't really have a motivation to screw you over like the US government does with printing money. They would rather make you happy as a customer so you keep coming back. So it's not really solving anything. The decentralized aspect of the application 99% of the time doesn't really solve anything. So it doesn't add anything, but it adds a lot of cost. So from a business perspective, you have more cost, and you're solving something that most people aren't really concerned with. Like, and this is pretty evident, right? Like decentralized gambling, right? Like people want to gamble. Now, if it's illegal in your jurisdiction, yeah, maybe that makes sense. But if you like live in the United States, you can go and bet on a website that's based in the Cayman Islands pretty easily. And you don't have a problem necessarily, trusting that central entity that runs those bets. In fact, most of the time, that entity is exactly what you want. You want them to be motivated to make you happy. Instead, if you have like a decentralized gambling thing, then, well, how are you going to know that the counterparty is like legit? Well, okay, maybe they lock up their funds in a smart contract or whatever, but how do you know that the Oracle is legit, that they're actually going to report the correct score of the game? Well, maybe the Oracle has a reputation. Well, then how do you know that they're technically competent to secure their private key in a way that makes sense? Well, we'll use multiple oracles. Well, then how are you going to make sure that they're not colluding with each other and they're not like Sybil attackable? See, there are problems on top of problems on top of problems, and it's not so easy to solve. And even if you manage to solve it, well, what's the Cayman Islands gambling company going to do? They're going to be like, okay, we'll provide all of those things in a provable way, but we won't use a blockchain. We'll still be centralized, and they'll have less cost, right? Like, that's what I'm talking about with decentralized applications. This is why like none of them have very many users. It is because it's too expensive, doesn't really make sense, and like the incentives are all wrong. Anyway, hopefully that helps you. If you are building a decentralized application and want to argue with me, please do so in the comments. This song is done.